I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
There is no plan for doing this. There's just the speech and a few slogans, and there's no money to put behind it, and there's nothing you can say what he's actually going to do.
Break and we'll give you what you want. This government cannot govern. It's got no backbone. It won't stand up for us. And people will see it. They're seeing it. I'm seeing it everywhere.
Is set to suspend 7 Labour MPs who rebelled to vote in favour of scrapping the 2-child benefit cap.
Has Keir Starmer completely lost the plot? Because if his latest speech is any indication, we're all in for one heck of a political rollercoaster. In a move that has left even his most loyal followers scratching their heads, Starmer has delivered a speech so absurd, so baffling, that it could very well lead to the shutdown of the government. Yes, you heard that right. Starmer's words may have just thrown the entire political system into chaos.
And so I make no apologies for any of the decisions we've had to take to begin the work of change. And no apologies to those still stuck in the 1980s, who believe that unions and business can only stand at odds, leaving working people stuck in the middle, who cannot see that this country needs a new path on growth.
In a speech that will likely go down in history as one of the most bewildering political addresses ever given, Keir Starmer decided to. Well, it's hard to say exactly what he decided to do. Was he trying to make a point about the economy? Working class people? Selling out to trade unions? All of the above. No one really knows for sure, including, it seems, Starmer himself. Well, confusion is still forgivable. Being tone deaf isn't. Starmer harps on about how he's actually bringing good change and how he will ignore everyone who disagrees with him.
I won't take lectures from the Tories or others who complain every time this government tries to undo the damage that they have done, clinging desperately to the failed model of the past. And nor will I take seriously the complaints of people who had their time, faced with the same difficult problems, chose to run away from the responsibility of fixing them.
With phrases like no apologies and won't take seriously whatever that means, since Labour hasn't done anything serious so far, Starmer managed to alienate not just his critics but even his supporters. The Labour Party leader's attempt to sound profound came off as incoherent, and now the country is left wondering, is this man fit to lead? Seriously, a man who disregards all criticism like this is supposed to bring change. You'd expect some humility from the former leader of the opposition, whose job was to complain and criticise.
And that's why I call now, as before the election, for the politics of partnership, with us in government, with business, and most importantly of all, with working people. Now that sounds very straightforward and attractive.
Straightforward and attractive for him. The guy is openly declaring his love for unions, offering to work with them and form partnerships. It wasn't just that his speech was unclear. It was that Starmer seemed to be advocating for policies that could effectively shut down the government. Among his most head-scratching suggestions was this partnership. Sure, he warned them that not every union demand will be met, but he did not define any clear boundaries. We've seen, just a few weeks ago, he gave huge pay rises to them. His plans, if implemented, could grind government operations to a halt. Naturally, this isn't surprising. Remember when Starmer was completely against cronyism?
We need to clean up politics. No more VIP fast lanes, no more kickbacks for colleagues, no more revolving doors between government and the companies they regulate. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
Tough words, Sir Keir. That's a pretty commendable promise, but sadly he broke it. The point here is that while practically selling out to the unions, Starmer had the audacity to give a speech on economic development. What's more is the unapologetic tone. If you still think that Labour hasn't sold out, here's evidence.
Because it can be revealed tonight that Labour cabinet ministers received hundreds of thousands of pounds in union donations before dishing out billions of pounds in public sector pay rises. So Keir Starmer's top team have accepted nearly £500,000 in cash and donations from Labour's union backers since 2019.
There you have it. If that isn't cronyism, I don't know what is. They've been accepting these donations, and shortly after gaining power, they've caved into the union's demands. Sounds a bit too convenient, doesn't it? Now, there's nothing wrong with public sector workers being paid a good salary. The problem here is of priorities. The economy is struggling and Starmer decided to give them huge pay rises at the expense of the pensioners. Yes, he picked train drivers over pensioners and he's not sorry about it.
He has chosen to take the winter fuel allowance away from low-income pensioners and give that money to certain unionised workforces in inflation-busting pay rises. So can I just ask the Prime Minister, why did he choose train drivers over Britain's vulnerable pensioners?
This was the horrible decision he made. Scrapping the winter fuel allowance was getting a huge backlash on its own. However, in typical Starmer fashion, he managed to make things worse with his speech. Firstly, he refused to be apologetic over it, and secondly, he exposed himself to be a lover of unions. Needless to say, this made the backlash worse, and now the government is facing more hate than ever. They could, quite possibly, come to a grinding halt at this rate. Let's be honest here, Starmer's leadership hasn't exactly been stellar to begin with.
Kind of he's got a brittle premiership anyway, because only 20% of the country actually voted for him. And so he's governing like everyone agrees with him, which they don't. And I think this comes through in his demeanor. He looks afraid. He looks like a deer in the headlights. You know, he looks like a shark that's just been confronted with an even bigger shark. And this is really hurting his favorability. Really. Now, they were never very good anyway, as you can see.
Yeah. He's scared, and it's very obvious from his demeanor. From flip-flopping on major issues to failing to inspire confidence within his own party, the man has been struggling to maintain control. And now, with this speech, it's like he's throwing in the towel, as if to say, well, I've tried everything else, so why not go for broke?
Are Labour favouring unions over pensioners, do you think? Removing winter fuel allowances from many pensioners, yet big handouts to those who have, you know, and good for them, I suppose, for negotiating with this government, getting 22% for junior doctors, getting 15% for train drivers. I don't begrudge anyone a high salary, but can we afford it?
Good for them, sure, but no, we cannot afford it. The absurdity of his suggestions has led many to question whether Starmer even understands the consequences of his own policies. Proposing a partnership with the unions during one of the most turbulent economic and social periods in recent history. It's like he's daring the government to implode. And if that wasn't enough, he's also thrown in some vague proposals about fixing the immigration crisis, because apparently, what Britain really needs right now is more broken promises.
It wasn't the Tories who have basically thrown away every deportation plan that we had for illegal migrants, any form of attempt of a deterrent, not that I was the planner of the Rwanda scheme, and basically accelerated asylum applications so that those who come into this country know that they will be given safe passage and settled in this country.
Of course, no Starmer speech would be complete without some mention of immigration and crime, two issues that the Labour leader has flip-flopped on more times than we can count. Starmer continues to hammer speeches about being tough on crime and solving the illegal migrant crisis. But the reality is far from it. And when a leader is saying one thing and doing the other, people get mad at the cognitive dissonance. Take, for example, him scrapping the Rwanda scheme and promising a better alternative. Months later, we have no deterrent to illegal migration, and Starmer's alternative is nowhere to be seen. Does he take us for fools?
It is. It's his response to illegal migration, which is to speed up the asylum process, encourage them to come to the UK. It's his approach to law and order is to basically say you will not be punished. That encourages criminality.
Of course it does.
And it's also his approach to the unions by saying, if you go on strike, we'll just break and we'll give you what you want. This government cannot govern. It's got no backbone. It won't stand up for us. And people will see it. They're seeing it. I'm seeing it everywhere.
Really, that's their approach to everything. In speeches and public appearances, say one thing, and in reality, pass horrible policies. The same guy who wanted strong punishments for criminals is now releasing them early. In his speeches, he promised to lower crime rates and make sure justice is served. Right now, all we see is Britain being served on a silver platter to lawlessness. It's no wonder people are confused. Does Starmer want more law enforcement or less? Does he want tighter borders or looser ones? At this point, it's impossible to say. Needless to say, this has caused an insane backlash from everyone, especially his own party. Labour MPs are speaking up against him.
a huge week. So we're going to have the vote on that winter fuel payment cut tomorrow. And it sounds as though there are about 50 Labour MPs who aren't happy with Keir Starmer's policy. About 30 of them are actually considering voting against the government or abstaining.
Unsurprisingly, Starmer's speech has not gone down well. Within hours, MPs on both sides of the aisle were blasting his proposals as dangerous and unworkable. That's right, there's internal divisions within the Labour Party now. Suddenly, it doesn't sound too outrageous to suggest that if Starmer continues on his current path, we could see a government shutdown, something that Britain hasn't experienced in living memory. The people weren't exactly giddy over the situation either. The drop in the polls speaks for itself.
More than half of Brits have a very different view to others, believe the UK is heading in the wrong direction under Labour, according to this polling, in a sign that the new government's honeymoon period is coming to an end, if it even began. The Ipsos survey found the Prime Minister's net rating has slumped from 7 immediately after the election to 0. It comes as Labour is accused of being under the thumb of its trade union paymasters.
Starmer's speech was nothing more than a desperate attempt to cling to relevance. It's almost as if he's lost control of his party, and now he's trying to drag the entire country down with him. This is what happens when you have a leader who doesn't know what he stands for. Even within Labour, the speech has sparked a rebellion. However, it's a rebellion that Starmer is ruthlessly punishing.
Breaking tonight, is Labour on the brink of civil war? Reports suggest that Sir Keir Starmer is set to suspend 7 Labour MPs who rebelled to vote in favour of scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. The amendment was tabled by the SNP, of course it was, and voted on this evening. And these are the 7 rebels. Absana Begum, Imran Hussain, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Ian Byrne, Richard Bergen, Zara Sultana and John McDonnell, former Labour Shadow Chancellor.
The MPs who called him out got suspended. What happened to freedom of speech in Starmer's Britain? Still, MPs are not happy with him and are only staying silent out of fear. Soon, there will be the final straw in a long line of missteps from their leader. Labour is supposed to be the party of the people, and now they're advocating for policies that could leave the country in chaos. It's madness. Now, between all this, you might be wondering, is Starmer practically destroying Britain?
He's taken the United Kingdom to its knees within 9 weeks of being in government. And everything he does attests to the fact that the Labour Party, and him particularly as Prime Minister, should be nowhere near their respective offices. They should be booted out of government.
The way Starmer is operating, they might just be booted out of government in the future. The real question, though, is why Starmer would deliver such a disastrous speech in the first place. The answer seems to lie in one word: desperation. Labour has been losing ground for months, with Starmer's approval ratings sinking faster than a stone in the Thames. In an attempt to regain some semblance of momentum, Starmer appears to be throwing out increasingly radical ideas, hoping that anything will stick.
But the big thing missing in it is where he said he had a plan. Labour had a plan for doing this. There is no plan for doing this. There's just the speech and a few slogans, and there's no money to put behind it, and there's nothing you can say what he's actually going to do.
If he had a plan, we would have seen it in action by now. The Border Security Command, the promise for a better economy, the pledge to lower crime rates. We've heard all of these and seen none of it happen. Starmer has said in multiple speeches that Labour had a fully costed plan for all of these. Yet here we are. It's a classic case of a politician who doesn't have a clear direction trying to find one. Starmer has spent so much time trying to appease every faction of his party that he's forgotten how to lead. And now, faced with the very real possibility that his leadership could be coming to an end, he's resorting to making speeches that sound more like bad poetry than actual policy. I'm not buying it, the people aren't buying it, and neither should you.
Keir Starmer's personal approval ratings are in free fall. 44% of people are dissatisfied with him. That's his worst ever rating. And things are set to get worse for Starmer, because remember when he and Rachel Reeves said stuff like this?
We will not raise tax on working people. No tax rises for income tax, for national insurance, for VAT. We will not raise income tax.
And then he went ahead and raised taxes. Typical Starmer behaviour. Perhaps the most telling sign of Starmer's decline is the reaction from the British public. Polls show that his approval ratings have continued to nosedive, with more and more voters saying that they simply don't trust him to lead the country. Even Labour's traditional base is beginning to turn against him, with many frustrated by his lack of direction and inability to stick to a coherent message.
I was very disappointed with Keir Starmer's speech, as I think a lot of people were. We should also just note, this isn't my opinion, in the leadership ratings in all of our national polls, he's down by about 30 points since coming into power. I mean, this guy is quickly becoming one of the most unpopular prime ministers that we've had in a long time. In fact, as I'm talking to you, only a couple of hours ago, we had a new poll out this evening showing that compared to when Labour won the election at the beginning of July, Keir Starmer's ratings are down 36 points.
Being the most unpopular prime minister is quite the achievement, not a good one, of course. Then again, Starmer doesn't seem to have any clue on good and bad. The bottom line is that the British people are fed up. They're tired of politicians who can't make up their minds, who flip-flop on key issues, and who deliver speeches that are more confusing than clarifying. And Starmer, unfortunately, has become the poster child for all of these political sins. Labour seems to be paying the price for his sins, and it's getting close to a complete shutdown.
And they're doing really badly, aren't they?
Yeah, it's the worst start to any government I've ever witnessed. I mean, most governments...
It's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, most governments have a honeymoon, you know, but this government seems determined not to have one.
No.
They've just gone off for someone else immediately.
Labour, led by Starmer, and our current government are doing horribly. It's going to be a rough 5 years under them, assuming they get to complete those 5 years. So, where does this leave us? Is Keir Starmer's political career on its last legs? It certainly seems that way. His absurd speech has done little to inspire confidence in his leadership, and the growing discontent within his own party suggests that he may not be able to hold on much longer. But perhaps the biggest takeaway from all of this is that Starmer has proven himself to be a leader without a clear vision. His attempts to please everyone have left him pleasing no one, and now, with the government teetering on the edge of chaos, it's only a matter of time before his party and the country move on without him, or shut down. One thing we won't shut down is our mission to spread the truth. It's something you can join us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.